Video games! Yes, that includes this thing. Video games were technically invented in the 1950s, so they've only existed for a total of around 70 years. So for anyone in my audience over 70 years old, how? Video games have such an immense influence over our culture today that it's nearly impossible to imagine living in a world without them. Video games are everywhere, and they have an infinitely tight grasp on the human species, and they're clearly not letting go anytime soon. They're in our homes, our schools, and even in this very video. So it begs the question, how do we get here? I think it's interesting to look back at the most important games in history and see what impact they've had in our world. Note that I said the most important games, not the first or the best-selling or the highest rated. This video isn't about just going down a list of hard stats, but rather it's more reflecting on what games were important enough to course shift the human race to where we are now. Of course, I'm primarily going to be focusing on the effects these games had in the United States because, well, fuck, I live here. What else am I gonna do? And with that disclaimer out of the way, it's time to begin our journey all the way back to look at what led to whatever the hell this is. Space Invaders. Launching in 1978, this definitely wasn't the first video game ever created, but like, come on, do you really think I put this on the list? Space Invaders kicked off what many people consider to be the golden age of arcades. It was the first game to actually be a cultural phenomenon, both in its country of origin, Japan, but also across the globe. See, while you might be able to recognize some of the arcade games before Space Invaders, such as Pong or Breakout, none of them really reached the levels of virality that Space Invaders did, and with pretty good reason. While this doesn't look very impressive by today's standards, the innovations Space Invaders came up with set the standard for pretty much every shooter game afterward. Yeah, that's right, I said it. This is just a Space Invaders clone. Looking back, it's almost impossible not to give this game the reverence it deserves. It's a beautifully simple game on the surface, but when you look closer, you realize that it's all about a balance of risk and reward, which requires complex thought and optimization to use properly. In order to beat the game, you have to shoot the enemies, but in order to do that, you have to put yourself in a position where the enemies can also shoot you. So every moment you spend under the umbrella of safety is a moment not progressing toward the goal. On top of that, the enemies are moving, which means that the danger zone is constantly shifting, but it also means that the most optimal place for a player to shoot from is moving too. On top of all that, there's special little hidden bonuses through the mystery ship at the top of the screen. The mystery ship is incredibly difficult to hit, but super rewarding if you're skilled enough to do it. It rewards skill and risky play in ways that are constantly thought about by industry professionals even today, and that's amazing! Plus, it was the first game to ever have a continuous soundtrack that wasn't interrupted by sound effects, which was kind of unheard of at the time and didn't become an industry standard until much later. Okay, look, I didn't say that the soundtrack was good. But all in all, while Space Invaders wasn't the first video game, nor was it the highest grossing arcade game, it definitely was the first highly influential video game, setting standards for pretty much every video game style and genre that are followed even today. That said, there's another arcade game released just 2 years after Space Invaders that sold more cabinets and started even more industry standard practices that are followed today. Despite being in a completely different genre from Space Invaders, Pac-Man built upon the foundation of risk and reward introduced by its shooter cousin to become the true face of gaming, not only in a figurative sense due to its gameplay, but also in a very literal sense too. Pac-Man was the very first video game in history to have a mascot, of course being the titular Pac-Man. Every game prior had players playing as a generic racer, spaceship, or whatever the hell this is. But Pac-Man had an actual character, a man of Pac, so to speak, and holy fuck was that a good idea. It made the game instantly recognizable to anyone with eyes and knew what a circle was.
Holy shit, is that a Pac-Man?
On top of the introduction of an iconic mascot, Pac-Man also introduced other new industry standards like power-ups through the power pellets, complex enemies through the ghosts that all behave in different ways, and even cutscenes. Why does the ghost have legs? All of the new introductions were rapidly adopted and expanded upon in countless arcade games in the years that followed, such as Galaga and Donkey Kong, all of which were iconic and important in their own right, and all of which led to the next entry on this list. Super Mario Brothers. The three words heard around the world. Super Mario and the NES/Famicom brought arcade games home in a way that none of the prior consoles could. I mean, like, how the hell was this thing gonna play Burger Time? While technically Super Mario Bros. Isn't quite as impactful as the NES itself, it was the first and best-selling game on the console, and with extremely good reason. It built on the foundations of literally every arcade game before it, incorporating an instantly recognizable and relatable icon of a main character, utilizing power-ups, a diverse set of complex enemies and obstacles, and secret bonuses in terms of one-ups, coins, and hidden warp zones. All of that packed into a long and easily replayable game that you could have in your own home to play literally whenever you wanted to. I don't know why I'm trying to summarize what Super Mario Bros. Was. Whether you were there for its release or not, you know what it is and likely what impact it had on the world. It showed the entire world what video games could do, not just the nerds who went to arcades. Super Mario Bros. And its sequels pushed the limits of every console they were on, which led to instant success across the globe. If this were a ranked list of which games were most important to society as a whole, I think Super Mario Bros. Would be at the #1 spot. If it weren't for Mario, I generally don't think video games would still be a thing today, and I certainly don't think Nintendo would have been a household name. Mario showed the world what video games are about, and it showed video game developers what's possible, not only in terms of game design and production, but also in terms of sales. Without Mario, very few people would have bought NESs, so Nintendo likely wouldn't have had as much success with Zelda, or even developed Metroid. Other platformers like Castlevania and Sonic the Hedgehog likely wouldn't have been made, and while some games like Tetris and Street Fighter might have still been created, they would have probably been stuck to arcades. The NES allowed games to be more than an hour long since they wouldn't have to farm quarters, and Mario showed everyone what that means. Well, Mario and Pokemon! Talk about a cultural touchstone. If Mario took the world by storm, Pokemon Red and Blue on the Nintendo Game Boy was an earth-shattering global catastrophe. Taking video games out of the home and into players' pockets was a brilliant move. And while you could say that games like Kirby's Dream Land or Link's Awakening were more important games that took advantage of the portability of the Game Boy, you'd be lying. Pokemon was the Game Boy game. Hell, it was the video game for generations. Finally, a long-form video game people could not only talk about at school or work, but they can bring with them to school or work and play with their friends. Trading, battling, Pokemon was almost designed to build a community around it, and that community was the entire planet. Very few other video games before Pokemon were capable of building community. Do you really think people in the 90s were getting together to talk about their Diddy's Conquest playthrough? Pretty much the only other games to form any sort of community like that were either still in the arcades, where community was born out of high score competitions, or around fighting games, both of which were extremely limited in who could actually achieve a level of success to enjoy being in that community. With Pokemon, anyone and everyone could be a part of it. Let's be honest, if you were capable of reading in 1996, you played Pokemon. That's what made Pokemon so important to the progression of culture. I wouldn't say it had nearly as much influence on games in general as some of the other games in this video, but it had one of the largest influences on the world as a whole. And I think that's astounding. Look, I had no idea how to transition from Pokemon into this. Halo, released on the Xbox in 2001, which I never had. Whoops! I grew up in a Nintendo-only household, which meant no shooters for me. Admittedly, that made a lot of this list up to this point pretty biased, and probably past this point too, but don't tell anyone. But I think my lack of access to non-Nintendo games just further demonstrates how impactful the Halo franchise is. Halo Combat Evolved broke sales records upon its release, and every game in the franchise would continue to improve upon the previous game's sales. The first time I ever heard of Halo was around the time that Halo Reach came out. Yes, I am a 2000s kid. I define my life as before and after Halo Reach. But when I was cognitively capable of actually listening to other people and realized that games existed other than the ones I'd played, the #1 name I heard was Halo. The #2 game, of course, was Call of Duty, and truth be told, I wasn't sure which game belonged on this list, but Call of Duty wouldn't exist if it weren't for Halo, so Halo's the one that's here. Fight me. Shooters absolutely existed before Halo. Doom and Wolfenstein were iconic in their own rights, but it wasn't until the Xbox era that shooters quite got the grip on culture that they do today. Halo and Call of Duty shaped the development course for countless people. And even to this day, Halo is among the best-selling franchises of all time. While I can't speak to whether or not that's deserved as someone who just generally doesn't like shooters, it's clear that this game is extremely important to the world we live in today, just as much as Pac-Man and Pokemon. While Pokemon resonated with the hearts of many kids, Halo gripped the teens and glued them to their consoles. There's really only one generation left out, and that would be the adults who never really cared for video games. Now, what kind of ridiculous video game would ever be able to... Is it wrong to feel embarrassed? Wii Sports, the game that somehow outsold Pac-Man, Gen 1 Pokemon, fuck, even Super Mario Bros. Are you kidding me? How the hell did this sell 82.9 million copies? I've seen a lot of people say that the only reason it sold this well is because it came packaged with the Wii, which also sold phenomenally well. But I think that a lot of people are forgetting that Wii Sports was the Wii seller. Just as Super Mario Bros. Showed the world what the NES can do, Wii Sports showed everyone what the Wii can do. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Not just the people who grew up in arcades and were excited to bring that experience home, not just the kids who want to bond with their friends over Pokemon trading and battling, not just teens hoping to go wild in an FPS game, but everyone. Wii Sports was arguably the first game to successfully target the casual market. The people who wouldn't touch any other game that I've mentioned before. Growing up, I played games with my brother, never my parents, until we got a Wii and Wii Sports. Once that happened, my own mother became a Wii bowling legend, and that is astounding. By breaking into a new generation of people who'd never touched a Nintendo, Wii Sports took gaming from common and popular and made it a necessity. You're more likely to see 3 or 4 Wii remotes in any given household than you are to see a loving marriage. Hell, you're more likely to see Wii Sports in movies and TV than any other video game on the planet. It's impossible to really get across how much of a cultural impact this game had, and honestly, a part of me was tempted to just end the video here. Yeah, plenty of games since Wii Sports have been important in developments of history, but the day Wii Sports hit the planet was like the day Neil Armstrong's boot hit the moon. Everything changed. All because someone at Nintendo waggled around a TV remote and thought, hey, we can play tennis with this. And while lots of games were very successful at keeping younger generations, only 2 were able to truly sink their teeth into that older generation, keep them sucked into the world of video games forever. Why are you like this? I think a lot of people completely forget about mobile games when talking about gaming history. Mainly because, to many, they're not considered real games. However, that mentality overlooks the impact mobile games had on every generation. And no games emphasize that nearly as much as Angry Birds and Candy Crush. When Apple introduced the iOS App Store to their iPods and iPhones, it was a cultural phenomenon, in large part due to their marketing. "There's an app for that" was a phrase so well known, even Sesame Street made a song based around it.
If you want to comb your cat, there's an app for that. If you have to fix a flat, there's an app for that. Need a word that rhymes with gnat? Gnat, rat, rat, mat. Or a place to hang your hat? Got a chimp who likes to chat? There's an app, there's an app, there's an app for that.
The App Store was designed for all sorts of software, but games quickly became the most successful part of it. Short, arcade-styled games such as Trism and Bejeweled were certainly popular, but it wasn't until Angry Birds came out in 2009 that long-form games that could be pulled out and played in rapid short bursts were introduced. Admittedly, this sounds a lot like the developments made by the Game Boy when Pokemon dropped. Taking longer games out of home consoles and putting them in people's pockets has been done before, and it's not like the DS wasn't thriving at this time already. But what makes mobile games different is that they were cheap as hell, rarely ever more than $5, and they were on smartphones, devices that everybody either already had or desperately wanted for non-gaming purposes. Gaming was never the focus of phones, but an additional feature to an already wide-appealing device. Mobile games were something that you could sneak into class and play a few short levels of when your teacher wasn't looking, something your mother could play around with when she was bored at work, something literally everyone could find interest in, especially when that price point dropped from dirt cheap to free. Ah yes, free-to-play games thrived on smartphones, and it's no surprise why. Why pay $5 for Bejeweled when you can get Candy Crush for free? All you have to give them in return is your dignity. Yes, Candy Crush was the first of the wildly successful freemium games on the platform, where it's a completely free game that you can play all the way through to the end without spending a dime. But in order to do so, you were forced to take periodic breaks to restore your hearts, lost every time that you don't beat a level. Sure, you could wait and let these hearts restore themselves over time, or you could beg your friends on Facebook to give you hearts, but both of these options take time. What if I was addicted to the game and needed to beat this level now? Well, that's where in-app purchases came in. You could pay real money to instantly restore all your hearts and keep going. 99 cents for a full game? No thank you. 99 cents for a temporary refresh of my ability to play a free game for about 30 minutes? Hell yeah! However, such a shift toward freemium games pushed every mobile game to be highly addictive. And as a result, after Candy Crush, mobile-focused games started getting a bit formulaic. Once they found what worked to farm as much money as possible, that's what every game started doing. Hell, even Duolingo follows that freemium model. It's not like it doesn't work. People of all generations are still playing a ton of mobile games no matter what they are, and I think that just shows how much of an impact Angry Birds and Candy Crush had. But there was another game released at about the same time as Candy Crush that made even stronger waves of importance, and I think you already know what it is. Minecraft! I've talked a fair bit about my experiences with Minecraft in the previous video, and I don't think that my personal experiences were all that uncommon. The infinite voxel-based survival game that had single and multiplayer experiences, tons of mods, and tons of variety from player to player was an absolutely crazy experiment. It shouldn't have been as successful as it is, but look at it now sitting in the #1 bestseller spot of all time. Once again, Minecraft brought community back to gaming. Not through the game itself, but through how easy it was to share gameplay of it on YouTube. Because everyone had a different experience with Minecraft, it's an infinite game after all, every video had something interesting that no viewer could ever experience in that exact way themselves. Minecraft as a game and as a content machine spread like wildfire. Assisted by mods and multiplayer, everyone had something Minecraft related to watch. It's no surprise how much of an impact this game had. And without Minecraft, I don't think YouTube or Twitch would still be around, or at least not existing the way they do now. And that was the state of gaming for a while. Not much changed after Minecraft's peak of popularity. Sure, other games tried to reach that same level of social media virality as Minecraft did, and YouTube playthroughs of all sorts of games absolutely took off, but nothing really changed for a long while. Skyrim, GTA 5, Portal 2, there were a ton of extremely popular games for a while, but none of them really shaped the world in ways that the prior games had. They shaped gaming communities, absolutely, but I think it's important to remember that the world is far bigger than our little gaming community itself. GTA 5's 170 million sales is astounding, but it doesn't hold a candle to the cultural impact of Candy Crush's 2.7 billion downloads. I think the next important game to the world was Pokemon Go, which got everyone out of their homes for about a month or so, but while Pokemon Go was absolutely a historic moment even outside the gaming community, connecting non-gamers to their history with Pokemon and introducing a new generation to a new way to play, I really don't think its impact on the world was long-lasting. Pokemon Go is a game that a ton of people still play and everyone remembers, but when the world really changed because of it? Well, one argument is that the major change was introducing the young, newer generation to gaming, which set the scene for the next and last culturally important game on this list. Ah, yes, Fortnite. Admittedly, this game took a while to reach its status as important, starting in 2017 as Fortnite Saved the World, a players versus environment shooter where players would work together to take on hordes of zombies while building a massive fort to survive in. That game never really took out, but Fortnite's side mode, the Battle Royale, absolutely did. I can't say it was a revolutionary idea in and of itself. Battle Royale games had existed since 2012 when the Hunger Games came out, inspiring mods based on it for Minecraft, DayZ, and PUBG. But Fortnite took that concept of Battle Royales and ran with it, adding far more forms of paid interaction than any game before it. Cosmetics, dances, and alternative game modes, all of these set Fortnite apart as something special, and more importantly, something highly appealing to kids. If Pokemon Go introduced the younger generation to gaming, Fortnite drowned them in it. Every game today knows Fortnite dances, watches multiple Fortnite streamers, hell, even recognizes cultural icons from before their time because of Fortnite.
Oh shit, it's that guy from Fortnite!
And that brings us to today. You know, someone who hasn't been around for all of it, this reflection has really helped me understand the impact video games had both before and after my own release dates. It's kind of strange knowing that so much of this world had already been defined by video games before I was even a part of it. And it's strange to think that no matter what happens going forward, video games will always be a part of my life. For all the youngins under 69 years old, nice, but you wouldn't be here a single day without video games also being here with you. Of course, for all my viewers over 70 years old, you might have a different story to tell. So if you want your own existential crisis, I guess I should make a video about the importance of sliced bread, since that was invented in 1928. And if you're over 100,